You believed you were releasing her soul to heaven.
I felt sure of it.
But you still can't reconcile this belief with the physical fact of her death.
No. I thought I could find it, but I can't.
Do you believe there is a life after this one?
Yes.
Are you sure? Has it occurred to you that maybe this too is part of what you were meant to understand?
You mean accepting my loss?
Can you accept it?
Maybe that's what faith is.
Hello and welcome to Most Unwanted, an X-Files podcast. I'm Chex. I'm joined by Luke. Luke, how are you doing today?
I'm not too bad. The sun's shining. It's a good day. Well, on this Saturday morning, shall we say?
The weather's starting to turn around a little bit. We're starting to. It's becoming a little bit less miserable, which is always nice.
Yeah.
Getting over the last couple of weeks, getting reports of how, well, the at least the roadmap of how we're going to sort of get out of this lockdown, and hopefully, fingers crossed for good and not just temporary this time. So yeah, it's all starting to look a little bit rosier, isn't it?
Yeah, the future's bright. I was going to do the orange adverts then, but
very regional.
Niche. Yeah, very niche. But yeah, no, it seems like the weather's getting better. We'll be allowed to meet people again. Yeah, it's we might even eventually before the end of the year have an in-person episode. We said this last year though, so we don't.
We got our hopes up as well, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
But surely it's gonna happen soon. Like it's mad when you think about it, but it's been like a year. That's insane, really, isn't it?
I've been working from home now for a year, and it's like I used to work at home before, but it's not just the working from home; it's the working from home and also not being able to see anybody outside of it. Yeah, it's wild, but I mean, this will be a piece of history that we've lived through. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to look at it on the bright side, I guess.
Yeah, and we've got 40, 50 episodes of this sort of that stayed in time where where thoughts throughout it as well. Yeah. It's really interesting, to be honest.
Yeah,
I keep thinking about that about TV shows and panel shows and quiz shows and stuff like that. And I keep thinking about people showing repeats of that in 10 years time as they do now. You know how they show repeats from the 90s or the 2000s. I keep thinking, what are people going to think? Is it going to feel weird to people?
They'll I don't know. Why is everyone sitting so far apart?
Yeah,
do they not like each other?
Why all of a sudden did my favourite show start being filmed over Zoom? Do you know what I mean? It's really strange.
Yeah. It's just, like I said, that you can't downplay the negatives to this. Obviously, that everyone knows how terrible this is. But, yeah, like I said, on the sort of silver lining, it's one of these things that it's I can't believe this has happened in our lifetime. You know what I mean? Something this big. But yeah, you just have to sort of roll with the punches, I guess, don't you?
Yeah. It's I think what's going to be interesting now. You know how a couple of years ago, we've had those sort of scaremongering stories like bird flu and swine flu, and I know they were genuine diseases, but they never really. It was always touted as it's going to take over the world. It never really did. What are those stories going to be perceived in the future? A panic station's going to go as soon as we hear about any new kind of flu now. Do you know what I mean?
It does make me think that because allegedly, a lot of the stuff these swine flu and stuff like that, it was kind of it was nearly as bad as this, but it kind of just got nipped in the bud early, not through intervention. It just didn't pan out to that.
Yeah,
but. There's loads of stories now of people being warned, this could have been worse, we need to prepare. And they was nah, don't worry about it. I don't feel like that'll happen again.
No,
at least in the immediate term anyway.
We are definitely going to take things a little bit more seriously from this point out.
Yeah.
So, shall we start with a few questions with the boys?
Questions with the boys. Questions with the boys. After the chasing sunset, one of life's simple joys. Questions with the boys.
So, my question to you, Luke, I'm going to start off with a fairly easy one. I'd like to know your favourite Disney film.
Favorite Disney film? Does Pixar count?
It's contentious. I'm going to allow it.
See, in my head, Disney and Pixar are the exact same company. I know they're not technically, but they might as well be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'll allow it. Allow it.
If people are saying like, "Oh, Marvel's a Disney film," that's a stretch. I agree, but you know what I mean. Like it is.
Also, there is a line for you.
Yeah. Marvel and Star Wars, not Disney
film is Star Wars.
Basically, if it existed in mainstream before Disney bought it, it's its own thing. You know what I mean? So Marvel was big, Disney was big. Marvel and Star Wars was big. Pixar didn't become big until Disney sort of did its own thing with it. You know what I mean? So that's why I sort of put them together. That's my reasoning anyway. So in that case, if Pixar's allowed, I'm gonna say WALL-E is my favourite Disney film.
WALL-E, interesting choice. Any reason?
I just think it's really ballsy of a film. Like, this is a film that's essentially aimed at kids, and there's no talking in it for, 30 minutes, and I'm like, this is brave, because, kids get bored. I can't imagine. I just think, it's, as storytelling, I just think it's really interesting that they essentially started as a silent film, and it's still got all the charm of a Disney film and a Pixar film, so, yeah, I think that. If Pixar's not allowed, probably The Lion King, just because it's the one that resonates with me the most, and it's the one.
That's a solid choice.
To this day, I can still, if you play the music for the bit where do you know when he goes up at the end? Spoilers for The Lion King. At the end of the film, where he's sort of ascending the rock to become basically the music to that still to this day makes me well up. I'm like, if I hear it, I'm like, oh, I get a feeling in it. So I think that one's still. Probably hearing my voice. That still to this day has an emotional effect on me. So other ones I used to like Robin Hood and stuff, but that is just some daft animals.
Daft Fox doing daft things that I couldn't agree more.
The chicken song at the beginning is still pretty iconic, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I'd say those would be my two. How about yourself?
It's Hunchback of Notre Dame for me.
It is.
Yeah,
good.
I this is the reason. The reason why I was. I asked this question is because this episode kind of reminded me of the Hunchback of Notre Dame for just the themes and the sort of the feel of it. I love Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think it's a really underrated Disney film as well. I never hear it getting talked about as in the upper echelons, but I think it's got the best villain.
Yeah,
I think it's it's a genuinely scary villain, this just sort of unhinged religious fanatic that's got this sort of believes it's his belief that God's on his side for whatever he does, and it's that sort of so it gives him this sort of resonance that he's going to sort of whatever he's doing, he's justified in doing it, and I think that's really interesting, especially like you said in a Disney film. I like it when you see sort of risks taken.
I hadn't watched it until recently, very recently. It was I think it was last year that we watched it, and there's a lot of stuff in that that's sort of for a Disney film. Yeah, it's quite mature, quite adult.
Yeah, it's dark. It's really dark.
But yeah, it's and as you said, the villain, he's kind of not what's the word? It's not like you're on his side, but you can kind of see where he sort of. This he's got this sinful he's got this sinful lust of a woman, and he's trying to push that down by being extra puritanical, you know what I mean? He's just I'll say puritanical. He's Catholic, isn't he? I imagine. But he's it's just good. It's just really, really good. Yeah,
completely agree. The funny thing is, just going back to like your Pixar thing, I think Pixar. I mean, Pixar. Everyone knows is like A tier. Like they don't do bad films, really, do they? Let's be honest.
I've seen one bad
it's
Pixar
basically
film
because they've been allowed to sort of take risks. Like you talking about Wall-E. Like if you think about it, most of the films that they make are like these big sort of risky ideas that you probably most studios wouldn't really touch, but they do it and it manages to work because they've got people who just fully believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
I do like Pixar for that. I've got to be honest.
Honourable mention, actually, it's quite recent in the memory. Soul. Have you seen Soul?
I've not seen Soul. Is it any good?
It's phenomenal. Like, I turned to Tasha when it was initial. I was like, this wasn't made for kids. No way was this made for kids. Like, long story short, like, so I won't spoil any of the story or anything, but the themes of it are how you've lived your life and are you happy with it at the end? And it's like, no kid on earth is going to understand that concept, you know what I mean? But it's like somebody who's approaching 30s, and I imagine like people in their like 40s, 50s watching this, they're like, wow, this is really tapping a nerve, you know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It's weird. Like, I mean, obviously it's a kid's film because it's like got all these like cartoony kind of characters, but the motivations and like the theme of everything is like, this is way more adult than any kid's going to like attach to. So yeah, it's weird.
Exactly. They do a really good job of like mixing the sort of the story they want to tell with like this sort of fantastical story.
Yeah.
In general, and they do that with all their films, so it's really interesting. Second question: what's your favourite cake?
Favourite cake? So I quite like red velvet, but that's kind of like a second underneath the classic chocolate fudge cake. It's just
you can't beat a chocolate fudge cake. I've got to be honest.
Chocolate fudge cake with cream. There you go. That's A tier for me. I'm not really a cake person. I don't really have cake too often, but if I do, it'll probably be a chocolate fudge cake.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as you. I'm not a cake person. I'll never sort of just go out and buy a cake. I think for that reason, my favourite is the classic birthday cake.
Yeah,
sort of jam, cream, sponge cake type of thing with icing. I think that's my favourite, but it's because it's the only real time I have cake. And like whenever I have it, I'm like, oh, this is actually really nice. I don't know why I don't have it this often. And then I don't buy it again. And then until the next birthday cake I have, and I'm like, oh, this is really nice. So you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's not because it's my favourite. It's just because it's the only time I really like figure out I enjoy cake. It's weird.
That's the thing. It's not that like I don't like cake. It's the same kind of thing. It's just I'd rather have other snacks if I'm snacking. You know what I mean?
Well, this is interesting. I'm gonna do an unprecedented thing now. Okay. I'm gonna go for a third question with the boys.
Yeah,
because it leads on from this. Are you a starter or a dessert guy?
I used to be dessert. I think I prefer starters these days.
I'm the same. I love starters.
I think it's an age thing.
I'd take starter over dessert any day.
Yeah, like I always prefer. I'm always more in favour of like savoury, like sort of snacks, I suppose. But I think that's an age thing because I used to eat chocolate all the time, and I still do. Don't get me wrong, like, but I'm not like all the time like having it and stuff like that. Now it's more. I'd rather just have something extra to start the meal than a starter. So you could call it.
That's incredible. How did you come up with that?
Ingenuity, that is. I think I don't know why I think I always used to have dessert, but it's changed with age. I don't know if it's any better for you because you usually swap it for some bread starter, which is probably not as good for you either.
Yeah, but we're not good. We don't need to think about that. What's good? Whatever tastes good, whatever you're enjoying, just go with it. It's fine. It's like in moderation. Go for it. That's what I say.
In moderation.
I can't be bothered to sort of figure out what I can and can't eat. No, I'm not living my life like that.
Well, we'll roll back to this when we both hit our 40s. We're like uncontrollable.
Do you fancy talking a little bit about the X-Files?
And religion. So this is episode 17 of season 5, coming very close to the sort of the last stretch of the season. It was entitled All Souls, and
directed by Alan Coulter and was also was written by was it written by Dan Angel and Buddy Brown, because it says story by on the notes that I had a look.
So the production notes have a bit more about it. It was the story was by them, but like the finalising was by John Shaban and
Frank Spotnitz.
That's it. Yeah. So basically, they sort of tidied up the original story to something presentable.
Okay, so it's a big collaboration, if you like.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Before we start, there is in my research, I didn't realise this myself. I mean, it is a little bit obvious in the episode, but this reading up on the episode afterwards, I found that this episode has basically been sort of deemed the spiritual successor to the two-parter we saw earlier in the season, which is Christmas Carol and Emily.
Yeah.
And this kind of is not the finale to that, or like the wrap-up, the unofficial third part, if you like.
Yeah, it's kind of like an epilogue that came out of nowhere, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how to feel about that, to be honest, because it definitely works in that respect. Like, I think it wraps up those two storylines. In fact, we enjoyed Christmas Carol and Emily, if I remember correctly, but we did have little bits of, like, criticisms about, like, Scully's motivations not really making sense. This episode sorts that out.
Yeah,
so it's very strange that it wasn't directly after. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you know what? The production notes basically say this, but I don't think this was planned. Like, you can tell watching it that this kind of feels like they sort of, just basically, they never planned to do a third part. They just fell into their lap that this was what it was, this episode anyway.
It makes sense, and as I say, I feel it makes Scully's decision making, and it explains why she did what she did so well in this episode.
Yeah.
That I think it would have been better straight after it, rather than having this weird problem of having those two at the start, then her seemingly getting over it very quickly, and then suddenly becoming haunted by it again. Do you know? And then coming to terms with it in the episode.
Yeah.
It just feels. Yeah, I feel like this should definitely have been. There's no reason why it shouldn't have been before it. Like, as I say, if it wasn't planned, it wasn't planned. But what I can say is, I'm glad they actually did do it in the end, because I feel like this definitely makes the Christmas Carol and Emily storylines make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can sort of there's parts of me that think this is me basically explaining away the gap. Is you do hear stories of people's grief hitting them like years afterwards. So maybe this has taken like a long time for her to process, and Scully was just stuck in her work, and then eventually when this sort of thing that sort of triggers her faith a bit more, maybe that sort of was the triggering point. But I know what you mean, like maybe it would have worked better closer to the original 2 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And let's make this very clear. Who are we to judge how someone should grieve? Do you know what I mean? Like, people grieve in all different kinds of ways, and there's no wrong way to grieve. You deal with loss the best way you know how, and the best way you think you know how in the moment.
Yeah.
But from a pure storytelling standpoint, it just feels a little bit off kilter. It feels a little bit weird to suddenly go back to it after 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes.
Yeah, it might have made more sense to sort of condense it. But again, I do feel like this kind of fell into their lap. So maybe that's why. But I know what you mean. It does feel like we have this weird like in between time, maybe between it. But, yeah.
I mean, we've given our overall views on the episode. So actually, to be fair, we've kind of given our overall views of like where it places in the season. So let's get straight into the plot, shall we? We start off in Alexandria, Virginia, and we basically start off at a baptism. The baptism of Dara Kernoff. Dara Kernoff is wheelchair bound. We don't really know what's wrong with her or what disability she has, but we know that she's in a wheelchair, and it doesn't seem like she can communicate too well.
No.
And there's a priest there. I didn't know this. I apparently, again, according to my research afterwards, apparently this is the same priest that helped Scully out earlier in the season, like through her, like I think it was on Redux, where like she had a conflict with her faith.
Yeah,
but I didn't know this myself.
No, I didn't recognize him. The only sort of indicator to that is later on when he sort of pulls her aside and says, "Oh, can you help me out with this?" That's the only indicator. But even then, I was kind of like, I didn't draw the connection. So
I didn't remember his face, and I maybe I should have, but like we spent like 30 seconds with him. It's fine.
I feel like this series has been us going, I don't remember that.
Honestly, it's infuriating, really, because you want to like, how are we supposed to remember like a guy 8 hours ago appearing for a minute? Like, you just can't, can you?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like I said, there's just a lot happening. I feel like if it was all one big, if you back-to-back watched all of these, then yeah, it would kind of make sense. But yeah, that was probably, for us, if it was 8 hours ago, is like longer than 8 weeks ago. You know what I mean? A lot's happened.
So, this Dara, this girl, she gets baptized, and her mother and father seem quite proud that it's finally being done. But bear in mind, Dara's, I think, 16 years old. She's like a young adult at this point. And then later that night, she gets out of bed and she starts walking. Her dad wakes up by the time she's already got outside, and as he looks outside, he sees her walking in the rain, and obviously goes out and can't believe what he's seeing. He goes out, and we see Dara fall to her knees in the streets, and there's this sort of big light as she sort of holds her hands up to in almost like a praying fashion. Or like, I don't know what it would be called, praying, but sort of palms up to the sky.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like very biblical anyway, from what you can see. Yeah.
And her father catches up to her. We see that she's walking towards a person, but we don't see that person. It's a sort of shadowy figure. And as her father catches up to her, she's already on her knees, and he sees that her eyes have gone completely black. And he just holds her in the rain, and that's the beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
What did you think?
So I got some Exorcist-like vibes at the beginning, and that's honestly where I thought it was going. And I was like, oh no, this is... If it's going to be trying to have that kind of like supernatural story with, like a demon or some kind of like, in this case, like, angelic thing, I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. Pleasantly surprised by the end, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I had my reservations with it being a religious plot. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't... You know how I feel about ghosts and ghost storylines. I think everyone knows how I feel about ghost storylines. It's kind of the same for me about religious plots. But then, saying that, there's a lot of religious plots, especially in X-Files, that I really enjoyed, because I enjoy the idea of, in this world full of, like, fantastical and supernatural creatures, where does religion fall in this? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's all well and good Mulder sort of giving a quick, like a witty line about how Scully believes something that she doesn't see, and why can't she believe in aliens? But it genuinely, when you've got devils and angels that you're fighting, it genuinely does pose the question, well, is this heaven confirmed? Is this the afterlife confirmed? And what does that mean for the series as a whole? And I find that question really interesting. Yeah. So yeah, again, reservations, but pleasantly surprised throughout the episode.
It is also interesting as well, though, because when we do have these religious episodes, it tends to flip Mulder and Scully. And we've seen that in this series a lot, to be honest. But yeah, whenever it's from something religious, it is always hilarious how Mulder's like, no, just a man who's killing everybody. And he's like, hang on, if this was like, I don't know, some alien had popped out or something like that, you'd be like singing from the rooftops that this is some kind of alien. You know what I mean? But as soon as it's something supernatural and religious, he's like, no, not a chance. That's not what it is. It's
I wonder whether there is something to it. I know you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that like this trend of this season of the roles being reversed, and whether there's like they're leading up to something with that, or whether it does feel too purposeful now for it to be an accident, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely feels like this series is the one where Scully's the believer and Mulder's the skeptic for a lot of it anyway.
I wonder whether we're going to get to a point where, especially for the film, where it's about them finding that middle ground.
Yeah.
And being on the same page. I mean, let's be honest. Scully, I'm not expecting next season Scully not to be the skeptic. Like, the show doesn't work unless Scully's the skeptic and Mulder's the believer.
The only thing I can think of is, so they've introduced that what's-it character. Who was the guy now? Spender, is he?
Mm-hmm.
And he was quite skeptical. The only thought there is he's brought on board as like a third agent in their like group, and we have Mulder and Scully as both believers, and this guy's like,
bully him.
Yeah, you're like, you idiot.
You will believe this.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, it does always need that skeptical sort of side of it. Otherwise, it's just two people chasing aliens, basically.
Yeah. So after the intro, Scully is contacted by, she's going to church, she's going to mass, and the priest. I don't know whether the priest is the right word. I always get confused between priests and vicars and whatnot. I'm not sure what's what, so I do apologise if I'm getting that wrong. Father McHugh, I should probably say, asks her to stay behind and says basically once they're in it alone, he asks her for help on this case. He says he doesn't know where he's at. He doesn't know how. It's all a bit over his head, and he needs her help because he believes her position in the FBI would give the family some peace.
Yeah.
If she could be there to sort of walk them through things.
Yeah. I don't know if we mentioned as well, but isn't this the story like framed in like a confessional at the beginning?
So they keep switching back and forth. Yeah. At the beginning, it appears to be. It's not made very clear that the confessions are after the fact.
Yeah.
It kind of. I got the impression that there was that it was as it was going along. But yeah, it's framed that throughout the episode, Scully's given this confession about the story, and she's talking about the similarities between this story and the story of her daughter Emily.
Yeah.
And her guilt and her coming to terms with that. As I say, it's all the way through. I was probably just going to talk about that through at the end.
Yeah.
In the sort of chronological timeline of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Scully goes to visit this family, and the Kernoffs they're called, and she learns that Dara was, she had a spinal deformity. She also learns that Dara was adopted at an early age, and the mother seems to be dealing with it okay, as much as you can with a loss of a daughter. But the father is adamant he saw her walking, and his faith has been rocked by this. He can't stop blaming God for what has happened, and the mother wants peace for her and her husband at this point.
Yeah, and as we see in the confessionals and stuff, this feels like it's very much the dad is essentially going through the exact same things that Scully went through, and her anger that this has happened and that God's let this happen. I always forget that Scully's like quite not devoutly Catholic, but she's quite quite Catholic. I don't know what the word would be.
Yeah, she's a little bit Catholic.
A little bit Catholic.
There's a hint of Catholic there.
But yeah, she it's the scale. We need a scale. But yeah, I always forget about that because it's not really brought up until it's a religious episode. And I'm like, oh yeah, this obviously makes sense because of this, I honestly thought, oh, this is going to be a Scully solo episode, and in large parts it is, and until towards the end, I suppose we get more of a duo role. But yeah, it's interesting that they sort of have this sort of character as the dad who's just basically going through the exact same thing as Scully. And it allows sort of Scully to sort of vent or put her frustrations as well of what happened to Emily onto this new situation that's happening, which is why I suppose it all comes to the forefront again. It's interesting. I do quite like how this has been framed, and yeah, I'm not sure how much of this was included initially or how much was added after the fact. But either way, you can't really tell. It sort of works with the flow of the episode.
It does. It feels like it's of a piece with the other two episodes.
Yeah.
Scully does talk to the father, Lance, a little bit, and Lance tells her of the figure he saw her walking towards. And he tells her that the reason why his faith has been rocked so much is because he believes that figure could have been the devil. And we already kind of get this. Well, I mean, let's not pretend like we don't know what happens. They start setting up this bait and switch really early. So, and I think it's done really effectively throughout the episode, in the sense of the story they're telling through most of the episode is that a devil, this shadow man, is coming and tempting these souls away and is killing these poor young girls. Whereas in actual fact, we learn later on that this is an angel that's coming to them, and it's their savior that's helping them out rather than the devil. I think that's I mention this now because I want to talk about it as we go through.
Yeah.
I think it's a very clever way of doing it.
Yeah, I really liked the setup of it, that it is actually they're being called away to a higher purpose essentially and saved, rather than be taken by the actual devil who has ginger hair, which I thought that was the
interesting choice.
Yeah, I like that signifier that he's the devil. He's got quite red hair, which is doing no favors to ginger people everywhere. Like,
you know what? I'd like to say it's a coincidence, but there's no way that wasn't brought up in the writers' room.
No.
There's no way.
No. I just feel bad because, like, as if they don't have it bad enough, you know what I mean? Like, people, like, always, like, take the piss and stuff, and now you've got them casting, saying, well, he's the devil because he's got ginger hair. It's like, oh, Christ.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I like that. And also, I love Father Gregory, the sort of, like, radical priest. He is the most sinister person I've ever seen. So as soon as they bring him up, I'm like, he's the villain. Like, he has to be.
This is the best. This is what I really enjoyed because. So okay, we'll get quickly into the next scene. Yeah. We see a priest, like you said, named Father Gregory, visiting a hospital, and he's going to adopt this young woman, and he's stopped by a social worker called Aaron Starkey. And Aaron Starkey says, I've just been assigned to this case. I'm sorry. Even though the court's ordered that you can adopt this girl, I'm going to have to put a hold to it because I need to run my investigation first. I need to just go through all the paperwork. You're going to have to hold off for a little bit. And Father Gregory's dismayed by this, and he ends up storming off. So we get introduced to these two characters, these two opposites. And the fascinating thing is, the story between the devil and the saints is mirrored between these two, and yes, the devil's played by the same character as the sort of the social worker.
Yeah.
But the Father Gregory is exactly the same as like the angel, in the sense of he does come across as this sort of villainous figure, and he does come across as creepy and unlikable. Yeah. But it's mirrored throughout that actually he's the good guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I found the mirroring of those two storylines really, really fascinating.
It is
because in both cases you assume that Father Gregory and the Shadow Man, the person in the shadows, are the bad guys, are the antagonists.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that's, well, it is on purpose, obviously, but like the amount of times you hear stories about the devil tempting you with a deal that you don't realise is bad until after the fact, you know what I mean? Like, so it is interesting that instead of having this like red-skinned, like pitchfork twirling, like devil who's obviously evil, this guy, he looks like the nicest guy in the world. And it's sort of, if you are in the belief that there's an actual devil and stuff like that, that's probably how he would sort of present himself to like sort of tempt you over. He's like, oh, with all niceness and kindness, and then it's like right at the end, it's like, bam, now you fucked. You know what I mean? Like, so I did like that. Like by the end of it, it's like, oh, that works, because like I didn't see him as the devil at all, but it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very, very clever. Because we wanted to get to that scene, just to sort of mention those points. I should mention that I passed over a quick scene with basically Scully examining Dara's body, and there's a few notable facts. The fact that her hands had scars on them, and Scully mentions that's from the removal of a sixth digit on her hand that they had she had surgery for earlier in her life. And basically the only cause they can think of is that it was lightning, that's what burnt their eyes. But the weird thing about that is no other part of their body had been touched. It was just their eyes that got burnt.
Yeah.
And they don't have any answers right now. And
they were kind of just stuck in that pose as well. Yeah,
exactly. Like that sort of palms up to the sky pose.
Yeah.
So this thing with Father Gregory happens. Sadly, that night, Paula is also visited by the same man, that man in the shadows, and the same thing happens to her. She dies in much the same way as Dara did, in this cell before she even gets out. And again, this makes you believe that Father Gregory is involved, because he was literally trying to get into that room mere moments before we watch this scene.
Yeah, and also his sort of outfit looks the same as well. Like, so he's wearing the same kind of clothes, basically. So yeah, it's also, I mean, it's obvious by the end of it that this is clearly going to be a bait and switch, because it can't be that obvious. But watching it, you're like, why, he's definitely the bad guy. There's no way he can't be. I thought it was really good, and the casting of this guy is, as I mentioned, it's just brilliant, because he looks like the villain.
Yeah. There's an investigation on the body. I'm not sure. I can't quite recall where the scene comes in. I mean, I don't think it's that important, but there is a scene I want to mention about Scully calling Mulder and asking not for his help really, but just sort of asking to help get the birth records for this new person that's died. And Mulder says he doesn't really have time. He asks for more information, says, I don't really have time. I'm currently working a case. I'm on someone's tail. I can't do this right now. I'll get it done soon. And as soon as he puts the phone down, he goes into a dirty theatre.
Oh, burst out laughing. The only laugh of the episode, but perfectly placed.
What? This is an addiction that Mulder's got now. Like, this is a porn addiction.
Yeah, he needs to get some help or something like that, because it's like, it's affecting his job at this point.
This is canon. Like, how many times has he thrown... The only thing he'll throw his job aside for is porn.
Which I didn't realise. Like, I was thinking about this while I was watching this scene. When I first started watching the X-Files, or like before I started watching it, in my head I had this like impression of what the characters were like, Mulder and Scully. And like I had this... So obviously Scully's the skeptic, Mulder's the believer. I think everybody knows that. But I imagine like Mulder to be like this cool, and we said at the beginning he's like this cool Han Solo kind of rebel figure. Yeah. I had no idea how goofy like they were going to make him.
He's a nerd, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? Like he is, but like in the best way.
Yeah. He's like really likable. Don't get me wrong. Like you still root for him and everything, but he's incredibly goofy. Like he has his weird quirks and everything. So yeah, it's just hilarious. Like the way the character ends up from what I expected him to be.
Yeah. What I would say is, and I don't know whether you agree with me on this. This episode, I felt Mulder felt different. I completely agree with what you were saying, but this episode, and like he's like not really working the case, so he's out of his suit. He's got his casual sort of clothes on in his jacket, and just the way he was presenting himself and the way like this roguish behaviour that he was just going at the case with. I just thought he came across a lot cooler in this episode. Came across like a lot more cocksure, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
That's his dress down Friday look, though, isn't it? That's the problem. Yeah, he's got that energy about him.
He gets that leather jacket on, and his confidence just absolutely flows through his body.
Yeah, even when he's wrong,
he ends up being wrong. Get that tie back on, Mulder.
Yeah. If he's not working, he's just going to get his hunches all completely off.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So. But he does help. He manages to get the birth records for was it Dar? Oh yeah, it was Dar's birth records.
Yeah.
So he does manage to get the birth records. Meanwhile, he can't get the adoption records because the adoption records have been struck off. So they're unavailable to him. Scully, however, has been examining Paula's body and realizes that Paula is the twin of Dara. But then Mulder corrects her again. It says actually they're quadruplets. There's 4 of them. And then we get the basis of the episode. Well, we've got to save these other 2 twins now or not twins, quadruplets now, because this is a pattern. Also, they noted that they did find out that Starkey comes into the room and reveals that Father Gregory was trying to adopt them. So he already lays the groundwork for this Father Gregory being the bad guy, and obviously they need to go see him.
Yeah.
And then all the signs are there. We see that it's like this rundown church he runs. It doesn't look great. The symbol of the church is an upside-down cross, which Mulder notes is like a rebellion against religion. And I always thought it was the devil, an upside-down cross. But like, it sounds more like it was just like you say, like a rebel division of the church. Yeah,
basically. You hear about this a lot, don't you, with like churches and stuff. There's people who there's like secret books of the Bible that are like, they sort of cast off, but there's some people who believe it, and this guy was there. He's the renegade who's like, no, this is important. yeah,
exactly. Father Gregory's adamant that he was trying to protect Paula, the second of the sisters, and he talks about how the devil is fighting. There's a struggle between, and then he talks to Scully and says, "You know about this. You know about these stories. You know about what's going on here. If you just let yourself believe it, there's a struggle between good and evil. There's a struggle between the God and the devil for these souls, and he believes that the other 2 girls are in danger."
Yeah, it's sort of dragging Scully into this believer role of that usually is Mulder, and Mulder's just like not buying it at all in this. Like, he's completely like disregarding what this guy's saying, and he's basically thinking that what we all thought, this guy's doing it. So it's interesting that we sort of keep going down that path, but I do like anything that plays on Scully's like beliefs a bit more, just because it makes it's just like an interesting sort of like wrinkle to her character, that she is like so science minded, but then she's got this like tie back to the like Catholicism and like that kind of belief. So it rounds out her character a lot more as well.
Yeah. There was something I wanted to ask you. So, interspersed between all this, we keep seeing Scully. Obviously, we keep going back to her in the confessional, but we also keep seeing Scully have visions of Emily and talking to her, and she keeps seeing the girls as Emily as well throughout the episode. It's not very clear why, until the very end, why she's made this sort of distinction between the girls and Emily, and why this is bringing up such memories to her. So what did you think of, as you're watching the episode, before the big reveal at the end? What did you think about Emily being sort of in this episode?
I just thought it was basically a sign that maybe Scully needed a holiday, because she has been gone through the ringer, like this series. Like, she's found that she's got a secret kid that she didn't even know anything about, to have that kid brutally taken away from her. And having to deal with that. And like, I think this was a case before, obviously, we get the reveal of what's happening. It just felt like this case is too close to home for her, and she can't object. As Mulder says at one point, you kind of, if you take a step back and we're not watching the full story, it looks like she's way too close to this case and can't be objective. And that's exactly what it felt like, is that Scully was kind of having some kind of breakdown.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to run through the next few scenes fairly quickly, because they're all kind of just a formality at this point, just to sort of get to like the big reveal at the end. They search for adoption records, and they find the 3rd sister. Mulder mentions that she was homeless. She tried to get sort of into a hostel a week before, and he believes he knows where they are. They start working with Starkey, the what would you call him? I suppose he'd be like a social worker.
Yeah, I was going to say the devil.
No, he is the devil, but he's like this sort of he's his guise is a social worker. He's trying to help these girls.
Basically,
there's a moment where they go and try and find this girl, and Mulder sees a car with an upside down cross, which you assume is Father Gregory's. Mm-hmm. And then there's a cut to Starkey going into the gate first, and it was this moment where I was like, something's not right about Starkey. Yeah. And I kind of started to figure it out. Not a bad thing. I don't think it was meant to be like this big shock reveal. But yeah, I did I like the fact that they put the sort of breadcrumbs there. They do find this third girl, but we also find Father Gregory as like this sort of, he's in the shadows, again, looks a lot like that dark figure we've already seen.
Yeah.
And Mulder points a gun at him, tells him to step into the light, kind of just holds him there, but the priests, Father Gregory, should I say, says they're too late, it's already done. And Mulder leaves him, which I thought was really strange. Like, if he thinks he's that dangerous, but he goes into the other room and finds the third girl the same way.
Yeah.
Sort of palms up to the sky.
And we sort of get this little, like, glimpse of, like, a bird flying up as well, which I think is sort of, like... we don't know what it is at that point, but obviously, like, it's that sort of, like... I guess wings and stuff like that. We're meant to think, something's like flowing up there or something like that. But I think it was just like this kind of like scenic image. I guess
symbolism of it all. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, again at this point now, I think it's too. By the third one, him being there, it's like, okay, this is too obvious now for it to be him. And we've already seen that sort of weird scene with what was his name? Starkey, is it?
Yeah, that's the social worker.
We've seen that weird scene with him where it starts to like become a bit more like, oh, okay, I think something else is going on. It's that classic X-Files slow reveal of the final, but it's good.
Well, we get a full reveal pretty soon because Mulder interrogates Father Gregory, and he basically turns around and says, I was trying to save these girls. We need to locate these girls before the devil gets their hands on them. And that's all I was trying to do. The only reason why I was there was trying to save them. And if we don't save the fourth sister, the same will happen to her. And so Mulder and Scully are trying to investigate. They're trying to figure out where this fourth sister is. Meanwhile, Starkey enters the interrogation room. No idea how he's done that, so it's obvious through some supernatural efforts. And he asks where the fourth girl is and what does Gregory know, and then he kills Gregory when Gregory doesn't give him the answers, and Gregory stands up to him.
Yeah.
Which again puts Gregory, this sort of guy that we've distrusted and we've sort of been sort of cynical of, and he's actually a kind of hero when you look at, like, he didn't give this devil the information he wanted. No. He stood up to an actual devil, and for the sake of these girls that he doesn't know. So it really, the bait and switch is really fun in this episode. I think it's got so many layers to it.
Yeah, definitely. And well, he's definitely heard him a pass to upstairs, and he's taken on the devil and not broken, and got burnt to death for it. It's like, yeah, he's done some good work there. But no, I did. It was just an interesting scene to sort of have this, like, because this was like the second, like, third of the episode, like, sort of towards the end, isn't it? So we're sort of getting all the revelations coming quickly now. But yeah, we actually see this face off and realise how supernatural the episode is at this point, because I think there's no illusions as to what's happening here at this point. Now is that, like, it's obvious what's happening. So I just thought it was an interesting scene set to sort of flip what we thought.
Yeah, the only mysteries at this point are we haven't seen the devil man.
Yeah.
Oh, well, not the devil, the angel, who we later find out to be the angel. We haven't seen that angel. And we also are not really sure where Emily fits into all this. That's the only mysteries we've got left. But yeah, we know who's the bad guy now.
Yeah.
Once they find out that this that Gregory has been killed, it obviously sets things in motion. They start looking for this fourth sister. They end up finding who adopted her, a guy called George Dyer. And when they get to George Dyer, they see that it doesn't look like he looked after her well at all. Like, it doesn't seem like he was a good father. But we find that Father Gregory had actually already found the sister, the fourth sister, and he'd taken her away with the promise of him still being allowed to claim the money for her but we'll take the girl. Basically, just doing whatever we could to get this girl out of there. And obviously the father didn't really care that much, so he just let this happen.
Yeah. Who's worse in this situation, the actual devil or the man who's adopted a person just to claim benefits?
It's horrendous, isn't it? Like it's never specifically said, but it's indicated that she was kept in the basement.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And it's in like this squalor. And it's, oh god, horrific. Yeah. There's just two devils in this episode. Let's be frank about it.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a scene now that I want to talk about that didn't ruin the episode for me, but I could have done without.
Yeah.
We see Scully. She's getting more as the episode goes along. She's getting more and more worked up. She's getting more and more emotionally involved in this, and especially as her faith is called into question once again. She starts becoming, what's the right word? Anxious and sort of stressed.
Yeah.
And we see her trying to get into a car as a dark figure approaches her, much like the figures that the girl's been walking towards. And as Scully looks up and a blinding light is behind this figure, we see this figure's a sort of a vague outline of the face. And it's like a bird.
Yeah.
It's like it's got a big beak. And then the face spins, and we've got a lion, and it spins again, and we've got some sort of like bull or some sort of other animal. CGI is horrendous on this, if I do say so myself. I understand what they was going for, but like this, I don't think it takes away from the episode. It's fine. It's just one of those things. I don't know if there's a good way to do this, but it just looked really stupid. The facial expressions of the animals, they all look confused. Like, it just looked really weird. But
yeah, this is one of those effects where, at the time, I'm not sure how it would have been taken. It might have been like, oh, that's quite a good effect, you know what I mean? But watching it now in 2021, it's like, oh, that's a bit ropey. Again, it just doesn't look good now. It looks... Again, it just looks funny, which is not the effect they're going for, and because of that, it kind of like, it does detract from what's going on. Not drastically, and still by the end of the episode, I was still positive on the episode. But yeah, it is one weird thing. It does, though, it does bring up, like, when they explain what that is, I'm like, oh, okay, I understand, like...
This is what I was going to say. I don't think it detracts too much, because we cut immediately to a scene of Scully explaining to Father McHugh about what she saw. And then rather than having this figure sort of tell Scully what it is, or like having this prolonged shot, we actually get Father McHugh talking about the legend it comes from, the story that it comes from. And I think that's an interesting sort of story to it. And I think that works well. Yes, we probably didn't need to see the CGI, but how was Scully ever going to turn around and explain it so the father could tell her about what legend it is? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those where you need to see it, because explaining it just would sound even worse, I think. But seeing it isn't great. But it's interesting, like, because I've never, obviously, whenever you think of an angel, you just think of like, you know, like somebody with wings, like a person with wings, basically.
A perfect being.
Yeah. It was weird that today, of all things, TikTok also had something. I was flicking through, and it was somebody like explaining what like these kind of angels are, like the original biblical angels, and they are weird. Like, they're really weird, like constructs, like these things. So when you see this, I'm like, it's interesting. I've had this a few days later, and I'm like, oh, okay, like there's a lot more to angels than what I just imagined.
Well, don't forget the devil's an angel.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just interesting that there's all these different angel figures, I guess. Like one he said was like just this big ring with eyes. It's like, okay, that's strange.
Well, Father McHugh explains the vision that Scully saw, and he does believe it was a vision and not the actual angel.
Yeah.
He believes it's brought on by stress, but he explains that what the vision was a seraphim, and the seraphim is an angel who fell from heaven and gave birth to 4 mortal women. 4 angels with a mortal woman.
Yeah.
So, these 4, obviously, we assume it's the quadruplets at this point. and he says that these girls were deformed because of their sort of an angel with a mortal woman. It didn't quite work. I did skip over this earlier, but Scully mentions that one of the girls has like bone things in her shoulders that tends to sort of go, this could possibly have been wings or some sort of like the start of wings, which again leads to their angel heritage, I suppose. And as the story goes, God sends Seraphim back to Earth to return the girls who have the souls of angels. They should be angels, and they're being returned to heaven to keep the devil from claiming them as his own. Yeah, which fits the story. Like it all becomes clear that this dark figure that we've seen is actually the good guy. It's an angel, and I like the juxtaposition of, like, let's be honest, when you see these girls that are dead in the poses they are with their eyes burnt out, it looks horrific, and it's hard to sort of imagine that as a good thing. Yeah, exactly. Especially to somebody who's that scientific minded as well, you'd think, oh, that this is some traumatic thing that they've been through. And at the beginning, I put a note saying, oh, what a poor woman. This woman, how she's been wheelchair bound, had these like spinal deformities, then can walk, and then is immediately fried. I thought, Jesus, what a life. But then you find out what this is, and you go, oh, she's actually been saved, essentially. Like, she's sort of been brought up again into heaven. It's weird talking about this in an X-Files episode, but that's essentially what's happened, is like their souls have been like sort of taken to heaven, which is the best outcome, I guess. You know what I mean? I mean, of all the outcomes, if heaven exists, that's the one you want. That's the best one, yeah. So we'll quickly run through the end of this episode then. Starkey reveals to Scully the information that he's found about Father Gregory saving the fourth girl. They end up going to the church, and Starkey stays outside and just starts talking to Scully and says, "You've got to find her. She's in here somewhere." Oh, I didn't pick up on that. Like, he stays inside the church. I was like, why is he not rushed in and like taking this woman? I was like, he doesn't enter the church. He can't. He's the devil by the looks of it. And Scully figures him out pretty quick, because as she looks at the ground and sees devil horns in his shadow, she kind of figures out what's going on here. She finds the girl, and as Starkey's shouting at her, "Bring her to me, bring her to me. She has to come with me. What are you doing?" Scully instead walks her towards this figure in the bright white lights. Yeah. And this is my favourite part of the episode, because this is where she's holding this girl's hand, and the girl attempts to walk towards this what we now know to be an angel. And suddenly Scully has a vision of holding Emily's hand, and Emily saying, "Let me go, Mummy, let me go." And Scully lets go of the little girl's hand as she lets go of the fourth sister's hand. And obviously the fourth sister dies the same way as all the others, but presumably goes to heaven. Mm-hmm. It kind of mirrors what Scully... It's kind of like closure for Scully, in the sense of, yes, the problems that we had with the episode as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, she let Emily die. Yes, she didn't try everything. But also, is this not... If it means her going to heaven, was she not doing the best thing? Yeah. Was she, especially if she believes it, and now it looks like there's confirmation of heaven, is it not the best to stop the suffering as when you see it, and let the sort of child... Well, the child wanted to go, do you know what I mean? I think it was a very clever... Like, obviously there's contentious issues if you're not religious, but let's put that aside for 1 second. In this world, I thought that was a really interesting parallel, and I thought coming together, I was like, oh, of course it's a parallel to Scully's, because she has to choose to let this girl go and take a leap of faith that when this girl dies, even though Scully won't know, she'll be in a better place. Yeah. Scully has to take that leap of faith. There's even that parallel as well between, like, so obviously this is like a biblical, an angel has sort of created a child with a human, and it's sort of malformed and not correct, I suppose, is that, you know, right? It sounds weird saying that, but yeah, it's sort of not gone how they'd imagined. With Emily as well, it's a similar kind of thing, but with an alien, you know what I mean? So it's sort of the mix between two
because she's like got alien genes, hasn't she? Like this Emily, or that's what we're sort of meant to believe is like.
Yeah, we don't really know, I suppose. Yeah,
so
but
is like if it's like part human, part alien, and again has not sort of got like the sustainability on Earth. You know what I mean? So it's kind of got that kind of story as well, but from like a scientific basis. And she's taken the ending of I need to let it go and go to heaven. So yeah, and again, like whether you believe it or not, in this world, from Scully's point of view, she's been shown that this is definitely a thing. So yeah, she made the right decision in when you look at it like as a whole. I really enjoyed this. Like, and I really thought that this sort of unofficial third part really did cap off like that story perfectly. And I was surprised how this episode did all that. I didn't expect it to. Yeah.
In conclusion for me as well, like I really enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting to. Not that I wasn't expecting to. That sounds harsh, but I was definitely skeptical about this religious episode, and I thought it was handled brilliantly. Yeah. I thought it has to be a Scully-centric episode when it comes to religion. It has to be, because she's she's the one with the stakes. Do you know what I mean? She's the one with sort of that it means more to. And I think the parallel of her, literally, I mean, like, even if you look at like symbolism, and so often religious episodes or religious films or media, the symbolism's really on the nose, and it's like, and even so in this episode, as she lets go of one of the sister's hands, she's also letting go of the grief, or not the grief, the guilt that she has for letting go of Emily. And it's literally like that on the nose, but it works. It still works. It doesn't feel corny or cheesy. It feels like a resolution, and it feels like a resolution that I personally felt like I needed from the other two episodes. So you know what? This is the thing. If we're going to criticize some things, and we do, X-Files isn't above criticism. And if we're going to criticize some things, you've also got to applaud when they get things right. And I feel like they went back and fixed what I didn't like about those two episodes. Yeah, definitely. So fair play. I thought as a whole it worked really well.
Luke's production notes.
The original genesis for the episode was an idea developed by Dan Angel and Billy Brown, two storyboard editors for the series that had left after Christmas of 1997. In this incarnation, the plot was radically different. According to Shaban, the story was about Mulder and Scully and angels, but it never quite worked the way it was originally conceived. Shaban and Spotnitz decided to overhaul the script and feature elements of the earlier Christmas Carol and Emily story arc, as the writers wanting to include the very universal idea of Scully exploring feelings for her deceased daughter. The episode, according to Andy Meisler, thus became the unofficial third part in the story.
Yeah, and it works. I think it definitely works for that.
Yeah, again, it kind of feels like they didn't plan it to be this way, but it kind of just fell in their lap with it being about a religious thing.
Put it this way: if I decide to watch story arcs again, rather than like watching the series through again, I'd put this with the other two. Yeah, I agree. And I'd watch the three as a piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you don't really lose anything out from skipping the episodes or putting the episodes that are in between it afterwards. I guess there's no real the ordering doesn't matter too much. In order to counter some of the darker aspects of the script, Shaban and Spotnitz, on the behest of co-star David Duchovny, added several lines of comic relief delivered by Mulder. According to Duchovny, it was in the more straight-ahead investigative shows, the creepier and scarier shows, that it would try to make sure that we kept this kind of humanity alive through humour. Again, just for that one scene of him running into the porno theatre. Just got to laugh probably before all this heaviness to come. So definitely. And again, that's X-Files. That's X-Files MO, isn't it? Like, to have that sort of lightheartedness, it does make a difference, because they deal with some topics that could get extremely heavy. Having that little bit of humour to sort of lighten the mood, not only does it make it a more pleasurable viewing experience, but it also just makes it an easier watch as well. Yeah.
I think if you have everything pitch black, like, it can sometimes be a bit like, yeah, it just becomes like a slog to get through. Yeah,
exactly.
Scenes at the St. John's Church, the church featured in the episode, were shot at the actual St. Augustine Church in Vancouver, British Columbia. Prior to filming, the script for the episode was approved by the church's local... Going to get this pronunciation wrong, but I'm going to give it a go. The church's local Monsignor, I think.
Okay.
I think that's like a rank or something like that in the Catholic Church. I think. Again, I'm very knowledgeable on Catholicism.
Yeah, that's the thing.
As a failsafe, the production crew scouted several other churches in case permission was rescinded.
Oh, okay, interesting. I wonder how I always wonder how the church feels about stories like this taking place. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it doesn't like say anything bad against like Christianity.
It's in a bad light.
If anything, it's a good promoter. It's like it's definitely real, but I probably believe it.
It is angels killing girls. Is that a good message that you want out there? Is that the press you want?
To save them from the devil. You got to remember that. I don't know.
I suppose.
I don't know. Any kind of like, hey, what's the saying? No, bad press. There's no such thing as bad press. So there you go.
I feel like the church knows that's not true.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like the church thinks that some press is bad press.
certain press is very bad press.
I don't think over the last 20 years, every news story that's come out about a church or a priest or a vicar, I don't think they've gone, well,
get them in the door.
Get
them in the door. Yeah. You might be right.
I mean, you never know. Maybe they're really optimistic. Yeah. They're very much a glass half full kind of people.
I don't know. I don't think they are. The special stained glass windows were created that featured an angel ascending into heaven to go along with the theme of the episode, and the book that Father McHugh had about the Nephilim was created by artists. I can't speak today. By assistant art director Vivian Nishi, with guidance from Spotnitz. So there was some props put in to sort of add to the theme, I guess.
Yeah. I've never heard of that story before, so it was interesting. I enjoyed hearing about it.
I've heard of like the names, but they're usually like names of like, I don't know, monsters in a game or something like that. They're never like the actual angels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Scenes at Father Gregory's church were filmed in an older boiler room at George Pearson Hospital. The location had previously been used in the earlier 5th season entry, Kitsunagari, as a cafeteria. The production crew initially worried that the building's high windows would mean it would bring in too much natural light, so some of the windows were lit up via artificial means.
Okay, interesting.
I never even noticed these, like when they put in like a different set. They change it enough to the point where I would have never guessed.
Yeah. But again, that's their job, isn't it? That's their job, and that's what they're paid to do is to make it look as different as possible.
And they do it well, so hats off to them. Makeup artist Laverne Basham and hairstylist Angie Bemben were tasked with giving each of the quadruplets, all played by Emily Perkins, a different look. They were also responsible for making Jodie Rakicot, who plays Father Gregory, appear older, which proved particularly difficult given that Rakicot, that's a tough name to say, did not have any hair that they could dye grey, and he had, according to them, the tightest skin of any 30-something guy they'd ever seen.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
What a weird observation to make.
I don't know if that's like good like praise or not. You got some tight
praise,
skin.
Yeah, because they can't make him look wrinkly.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I was going to say, because he didn't look old at all in this.
No.
I wouldn't have thought he was older. But the visual effects to create the shifting heads of the seraphim were created with CGI, which visual effects supervisor Laurie Carlson-George finalised only hours before airtime. The scene was
No way.
The scene was created by having actor Tracy Olafson wear a lion mask to track the scene. Then the different heads were filmed against a green screen and composited. Various lighting effects were then interlaid to make it look scary and more angelic.
Let me tell you, it shows. It shows that this is only hours before.
You're like, is it done? Yeah. It's done. Yeah. I always feel harsh, like, criticising this, because, like, I always think, is this, like, was it bad at the time? At the time, would they, like, oh, that's crap? Or is it because now we've, like, so far removed from it? I know the budgets are different, though, but I always sort of look to, like, Jurassic Park to me is, like, the benchmark of making stuff look realistic, because that was, like, 94, and even to this day, I'm like, that still looks good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, budgets are different, but this still looked a bit not great.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I don't think it takes away anything from the episode, and I know what you mean about feeling harsh about it, but then, like, you've got to call it out. I mean, at the end of the day, well, what we are watching it in 2021. Like, we can only review what we're seeing, and this is because we've chosen not to watch it until this point.
Yeah.
So we can only review what we're seeing, and in 2021, that is a bad CGI effect. It just doesn't look great.
Yeah. I wonder if you could make better. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these days with just, like, basic, like, stuff. I don't know. But we'll see.
Sure.
Maybe somebody out there's done it. And finally, it's quite a long one, so buckle up. After watching a rough cut of the episode, Shaban and Spotnitz decided that they were far from the end. Feeling that something was missing, the two decided to frame the happenings of the episode with two scenes featuring Scully in a church confessional. Vancouver producer J.P. Finn was chosen to play the priest due to his hush delivery and map of Ireland features. Initially, Gillian Anderson had been given the script for these scenes days in advance. On the day of filming, however, she was sent a number of rewrites and subsequently demanded more time to become familiar with the new script, so as to not rush or undermine the emotion she was supposed to be putting into the scene. The crew ended up shooting a day later. Due to this, Finn was never actually filmed with Anderson. In order to make up for the additions of the church scenes, the first cut of the episode had to be trimmed scene by scene and line by line.
It's interesting, and I think the confessionals do make a good sort of almost like narration of the episode throughout the episode, and it kind of just puts gravitas to everything. It puts this higher meaning, and it, much like the visions of Emily throughout the episode, you're not really sure why Scully's so invested in this, but then when it gets paid off at the end, it makes it worthwhile. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
It doesn't leave any confusion as well. You know exactly what Scully's motivation is and, like, her feelings on this, because she's literally telling you, so that there's no sort of, like, ambiguity in that, like, how it's being portrayed. So I did appreciate that.
It stinks.
Welcome to the Critic's Files.
What would you give this episode?
I'm gonna give it a solid 8. Nice and round number 8. I did enjoy it. I thought this was a really interesting and ambitious, but they pulled it off.
Yeah. I sort of gave it around that kind of thing as well. 7.5. I just thought there's other episodes I've seen that are, in my opinion, better, but I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this one. Again, silly effects aside, it was a great episode.
Yeah. What did the world think, though?
The world, or 2,616 of the world, gave this a 7.6. Sorry. So pretty much in between what we gave it, which I'd say is a fairly solid score for this.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Welcome to Dan's Twitter Corner.
Just read a few out that we've got. Jen Shep got in touch and told us that the lead up to the season 5 finale and the film, starting with maybe Bad Blood, which I believe was episode 12, I want to say.
Something like that, yeah.
She said it might be my favourite one of the whole series. Can't wait for you guys to get into these last few, and then the movie. I'm really looking forward to the movie now, because I don't know what to expect anymore.
We got to figure out who's doing the commentary on that one.
It's a good point, actually. We'll share. We can share the load.
Do you know what we should? If it's like an hour and a half film, we should just do half each.
There we go. It's all as simple as we're on live on air. We're already sorting things out. It's all good. At Green Elf Oz got in touch. Luke and Check's joking about The Ring like it hasn't started fandom feud for the last 20 plus years. Bold move, guys. I am... you know what? As far as I'm concerned, The Ring's canon. I've decided this right now. Wow,
we would like starting fires, don't we? First it was like picking a fight with the entire country of Australia. And then...
Forgot about that.
Yeah. And now we're going to take on the fandom, or at least half of the fandom, I would assume. I'm
doing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say Mulder was married.
Oh, wow. I mean...
It's in the show. It's going to be canon.
I refrain from comment.
No, you cannot refrain. You get some courage. What's your opinion? Was Mulder married or not?
The fact that the ring's in the show, you have to believe that it's a wedding ring and that he is married or was married.
That's a bold move, Luke. I wouldn't have gone that far.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I like that like David Duchovny did that like as just a fun thing. But it is really one of those where you can take away from it as like whatever you want. But personally, I'd like to think that he was married, because otherwise, why is it there?
Yeah.
Other than a joke.
So yeah, thank you for getting in touch. That was just a selection of tweets that we've had in the last couple of weeks. To be fair, we've not really touched them, but we'll hopefully get to some more over the next few weeks. If you do want to get in touch with us on Twitter or anywhere really, but Twitter's the best place. And if you just search for Most Unwanted Pod, you'll find us there. If you're just searching for Most Unwanted Podcast, you usually find us pretty much anywhere. But get in touch and we'll be back in touch with you, or we'll read out on the show.
Cool.
Right. So next week, I haven't searched what the episode is next week. Have you?
I'm doing it as we speak. I love this on-air admin that we do. That we just try and like basically... Oh, there we go. All Souls X-Files. So the next episode is entitled... Wow, that's a long one. The Pine Bluff Variant.
Okay, give me your best guess at what this is about.
The Pine Bluff Variant. I think it's about some kind of like animal. Some kind of creature that's like, I don't know.
Like a monster of the week.
Yeah, I reckon it'd be a monster of the week. Some kind of creature. Something like that. Maybe it's related to trees. The pine thing. That's the only thing I think of. Who knows?
Who knows? I'm going to guess. The only guess I want to make is I'm going to guess it's like the setting is like a log cabin in the middle of like sort of like this ski resort.
Okay.
That's what I'm going for.
We shall have to see, yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. We shall see you next week. Have we got any other things that we need to resolve? What else have we got to say? You can have the final word. I'm giving this to you.
Right, we need to find out from the internet. You team Markle. Shall we jump on that fire?
Do we need to? Really?
Yeah, let's
Is
not.
that what it's come to?
Let's not. Let's add to that fire.
Because the world's screaming out for our opinions on it. I know everyone watched Harry and Meghan speaking to Oprah, and they turned it off, and I was like, but what do Luke and Chex think? That's the question. What do they think?
Yeah, what do we think? That's the question.
Should we give our opinions?
Well, I think that